Now, with that Israeli offensive in Rafah stepping up in recent days, what role is Egypt, just on the other side of the border, playing? Well, Israel and Egypt signed a peace treaty in 1979, but tensions are fraying now amid the war. Just this week, Cairo said it would formally support South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. Well, joining me now to discuss is Timothy Kaldas. He's the Deputy Director of the Tahrir Institute for Middle East Policy. Hello to you. Thanks very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
First of all, how would you sum up the relations today between Israel and Egypt?
They're heavily strained, as is quite clear, I think. It's from all reporting we've seen, it's the worst it's been since the fighting began in October. I think Cairo is extremely frustrated for a variety of reasons. Israel's operations in Rafah are definitely among the top concerns. Operating this close to the border, intensifying the humanitarian crisis on the border is a major challenge for the Egyptians, a major concern. But also, I think the breakdown of the negotiations and Israel's rejection of the deal that Cairo was instrumental in negotiating has also been very frustrating, as it seems that there's no real clear pathway on the Israeli side for what would allow for a durable ceasefire at this time. And so I think, and there's also talk of the Egyptians pulling out of the negotiating process altogether in light of that.
And can you speak to what we were looking at in that report we just played about Israel and Egypt trading blame for why the border is effectively shut at Rafah and humanitarian aid isn't getting in almost at all into Gaza now? Whose responsibility is that?
I mean, this has been a point of contention from the beginning of the fighting. Israel, when it was trying to defend itself in the International Court of Justice earlier this year, claimed that Egypt had full control over the Rafah crossing and the goods that crossed through it. But that's simply not true, and everyone knows that. It has to go through a vetting process at Nitzana, and American senators like Senator Van Hollen have pointed out the extraordinarily arbitrary manner in which Israelis have rejected aid trucks over a pair of scissors or other such items that has made it extremely difficult to move aid into Gaza. Despite that, the Egyptians continue to work through that process for several months. That said, I don't agree with using aid as a political football, but I think it's important to appreciate the context here. Distributing aid inside Gaza is also extremely challenging, especially with Israel operating at Rafah, taking over control of the Philadelphia corridor, and also its ongoing attacks against the police that operate in Gaza, who are trying at times to secure these convoys. So there's a lot of challenges. We've also seen it, of course, with the humanitarian aid workers themselves coming under fire by the Israeli military. So I think that the Egyptians are using this as a point of pressure on the Israelis. And I think that's dangerous given the scale of the humanitarian crisis. But Israel has done a lot to complicate the ability to deliver humanitarian assistance, and has at times placed undue responsibility on the Egyptian side, when ultimately the primary source of obstruction has been Israel throughout much of this period.
Do you think if there is a full-scale Israeli incursion into Rafah, bigger than what we're seeing at the moment, Egypt would be pressured by international partners to open its border to Palestinians who are desperate to get out?
I think, look, the whole debate around whether or not Palestinians should be able to cross into Sinai and into Israel proper as well, in seeking asylum amidst the kind of horrifying scale of hostilities that they're being subjected to, is extremely problematic. Ultimately, Palestinians have every right to seek asylum outside of this war zone. And while the fear that Israel will not allow them back, given its history, as is being marked today, of not allowing refugees to return to their homes in violation of international humanitarian law, is a real and legitimate fear, it should be up to the Palestinians themselves to decide how they want to exercise their right of seeking asylum in the midst of this violence. And so undoubtedly, the Egyptians are worried that the escalation in Rafah will increase the pressure and the possibility that a larger number of Palestinians will seek to cross and the pressure on the Egyptians to let them through might grow. But also, I think using their right to asylum as a political football on the basis of the fact that of anticipating that Israel is likely to violate their legal right to return in the future is inappropriate. I mean, it isn't to say that that anyone should be encouraging their forced displacement. Absolutely not. Although the scale of the violence is undoubtedly has displaced them already several times in the last 7 months. But at the same time, it is extremely inappropriate to prevent them from exercising that right to asylum and being able to flee to safety amidst the nearly unprecedented in modern history scale of bombardment that this very small strip of land has been subjected to.
And another aspect of Rafah and what's happening at the border, separate to what you're raising about asylum, is Palestinians who are so desperate to get out that they are prepared to pay vast sums of money to brokers, in inverted commas, to try and get them out. We're talking perhaps perhaps $10,000. Do we know who's profiting from that? Is it Hamas? Is it people in Egypt? Is it the Egyptian military? Are you able to speak to that?
I think that there's multiple people profiting from it. So the company that's facilitating these approvals, Hala, is owned by a regime surrogate in Sinai by the name of Argani. And so he's at the center of this, but he can't do this alone. It's almost certainly in cooperation with Egyptian General Intelligence Services and the Israelis. The Israelis have to approve under the current situation, have to approve the names of people who are exiting the Gaza Strip. Now, to what extent the money is distributed to whom is unclear. It's extremely shadowy, and we have really no access to that kind of information. But I think that it's extremely troubling that people are being basically extorted to try to save their lives and the lives of their loved ones in an act of desperation. And the estimates we've seen is some 80,000 to 100,000 Palestinians have already used this method to escape the violence, which could mean sums of money in the hundreds of millions of dollars were spent to escape Gaza. But I'm afraid we don't know how much goes to whom in this whole process.
Lots more I'd like to ask you, but unfortunately we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much. Timothy Kaldas talking to us. He works for the Tahrir Institute for Middle East Policy. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.